Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Here's a little tune to help you remember. Same drive, different day. Don't you wish you were getting away? Pack your bags and come on through. Texas, Ohio, Alaska, we're up there too. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Well, I hope you like my little song. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
And I'm Jake Novak filling in for Roger Stone here this evening on the Stone Zone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. This Justin Fairfax story, the former lieutenant governor of Virginia, definitely a personal story, a tragic personal story, family story. Certainly not saying it's not that. It certainly is that. But folks, this is a story that we need to pay attention to because I believe that Justin Fairfax and what happened to him this morning and his family, for those of you who didn't hear the story, murder-suicide. Justin Fairfax murdered his wife and then later used the same firearm to kill himself in their home in Annandale, Virginia. That's Northern Virginia. Fairfax was the lieutenant governor when Ralph Northam, remember him, was the Democrat governor of Virginia. Justin Fairfax was also a Democrat. Remember, they have separate elections for governor and lieutenant governor in Virginia. They don't run as a ticket, so you can sometimes have a split ticket, although I don't split government there. I don't think that's happened, though, for a very long time. But anyway, this guy was the lieutenant governor, and if you may also recall, there was a moment there in 2019 when it looked like he might become governor any day now. And that's what I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the way the Democrat Party has become a national entity. It's become like the Supreme Soviet. It's become a party that controls Democrats from dogcatcher on up. And this is not how our constitutional republic was put together, for a supreme party like in a parliamentary system or a Soviet system. It wasn't created this way. Our founding fathers understood a couple of things, to say the least. That's an understatement. And one of the things they understood is that personality was still important. The human behind these decisions, are you listening, AI people? The human behind our governing positions and decisions was important. And they wanted to have that human aspect, that personal aspect of a monarch without the absolute power of a monarch. And I think they did pretty well in creating that for our country in the Constitution, from the president down to some of the other positions and elected positions. And it created a nation where there was national accountability a lot of the time, but also, very importantly, local accountability. And the great Tip O'Neill, the longtime Speaker of the House, Democrat, put it best when he said all politics is local. And when he was alive, and when he was Speaker of the House, and he was a power in the Democratic Party, that was true. I don't believe it's true anymore in the Democratic Party. And that's much to everyone's grief right now. So how does this have anything to do with what happened with Justin Fairfax? Well, let me get into the details of this. It's important to understand these details. See if this sounds familiar to you, folks. Justin Fairfax, throughout his career, there were accusations among people in the know that he had had maybe some issues with women, with sexual misconduct. Sound familiar? Nobody made an issue out of it, though, publicly, hugely in the public eye. The news media didn't get into it. It wasn't front and center for him politically, and on down the line. Enter 2019, and Ralph Northam, the Democrat governor of Virginia, who also happened to be an MD, gets caught with pictures from his medical school yearbook, Eastern Virginia Medical Center, steps away from the house I lived in as a preteen adolescent. Turns out he had some pictures in his yearbook in a Klan's outfit, blackface, the whole thing. It's not looking good for Ralph Northam. You might remember this story. This wasn't that long ago, folks, 7 years ago. Come on, but you have to have a little bit of a longer memory. I know if I'm speaking to my colleagues in the news media, you probably forgot about it because the news media has the worst memory of them all. But you probably listening to this remember this story. Well, it looked like there for a moment, for a few days, like Northam was cooked. And that would have meant then Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax would be the governor of Virginia. I checked and rechecked the order of succession. And it's obviously the lieutenant governor. That wasn't a hard stretch. I knew that. I was wondering who came after him in Virginia. According to Virginia law, it's the statewide elected attorney general, who was also a Democrat at the time, by the way. Anyway, and suddenly, as Ralph Northam is teetering on the edge, these accusations come out against Justin Fairfax. Very well put together. Again, does this sound familiar? Very well publicized. Interviews with some of the accusers. Spit and polish. Really good job of getting this whole story out there. All of a sudden. And why did that happen? Because the Democratic Party, the DNC powers that be, didn't want to lose Ralph Northam. They found him to be more valuable than Justin Fairfax for a number of reasons. And it may have been because Ralph Northam, as an MD turned Democrat governor, had just recently, before that scandal broke with him, turned out he had come out all in favor of absolutely no restrictions on abortions at all, 9 months plus. And I think it was pretty well understood from those of us who understand this issue and how to play politics in America that was worth his weight in gold. He was worth his weight in gold. A former MD, I mean, he didn't get stripped of his MD's license, a doctor, elected Democrat. And by the way, doesn't it always feel like former MDs, former full-time MDs are always Republicans? I know there's some exceptions. Ralph Northam was one of them. So he already was valuable in that sense. And then for him to come out against no bans, 9 months, but no bans on abortions at all, I think that's what made him extremely valuable to the DNC. They wanted him to stay as governor at all costs. And if that meant cutting loose an African-American, young, up-and-coming guy like Justin Fairfax by pulling the trigger on the sexual misconduct stuff that was out there for their use if they ever wanted to, then so be it. And I'll say the same thing about him as I said about Eric Swalwell on this program a couple of nights ago. I have no idea whether those accusations against him were true or not about the sexual misconduct. I don't know. Gun to my head, sounds somewhat credible, but that doesn't matter. I'm not on a jury. I haven't seen any evidence, and neither have 99.99% of you. I don't know if it's true or not, but here's what I do know is true. Just like with the Eric Swalwell situation. The coordinated effort to get those accusations out there against him was just that. A very well-coordinated, well-funded effort. It worked beautifully. Suddenly, everything started to just become a waiting game. The folks who wanted Ralph Northam and his people to stay in office just had to wait it out. They waited it out. They got a big distraction. Sure enough, there's always another distraction looming. And I think in this case, the distraction was the impeachment stuff against President Trump, the first impeachment, which we will talk about in the next segment. And Northam was able to stay in office until 2020, January 2022. I mean, he really stuck it out. So, folks, this sounds familiar to me. This is a playbook that they just reenacted with Eric Swalwell. And that's one of the really frustrating things about political groups, in this case, the Democratic Party. It's like they just have a regular MO for getting rid of people. They don't even try anything new. They just try the same old nonsense. It's cumbersome. I find it annoying. And it's really not the way this country was established. It's very important, again, and in this era of AI, I think it's doubly important for all of us to understand the importance of this, of how our Constitution was put together, not just for the office of the presidency, but for our elected leaders. Our founding fathers very wisely wanted real humans with real personal accountability, but real personal experiences to make our decisions. They just didn't want them to have full absolute power. They wanted basically accountable kings, much more accountable than the king of Britain had become, even after Magna Carta in 1215, that put some clamps on the king's power. We had much more, certainly, clamps on our king's, our sort of virtual king's power, whether it's a president or governor, et cetera, et cetera. The idea that some unaccountable party, and yes, there are some elected members of the Democratic Party who run the DNC, people like Nancy Pelosi, But there's also people who are not elected and work behind the scenes, like David Axelrod. The idea that we would have a party with the party marching orders that you can't march away from, even if you know your people in your district aren't going to like it, is not the way our constitutional republic was set up. A great example of this is illegal immigration. You know, one of the Democrats 40 years ago who stood up against illegal immigration and did it very, very loudly? Robert O'Rourke Sr., Beto O'Rourke's father. He was the city manager of El Paso, which in El Paso government is really more important than mayor. And he made a big stink in 1986 against the Reagan administration's amnesty for illegal aliens because the city of El Paso was bleeding money in its hospitals and its schools, and he very famously sent an itemized bill to the White House. He was a big celebrity among the left for doing that. They even put him on 60 Minutes. He got on the front page of the New York Times, back when being against illegal immigration was something Democrats were okay with. But I'm not here to talk about the border. I'm just here to talk about how here was someone who was dealing with his local issue for his people and standing out for it. He wasn't going to call the National Democratic Party and say, can I do this? Because even then, even though the Democrats had a lot of people who were against illegal immigration, there still were a lot of people within the Democratic Party powers, although they weren't as strong as they are now, who were in favor of more open borders, most notably Jesse Jackson, who felt strong enough about it that when he ran for president the second time in 1988, just 2 years later, made open borders a big part of his campaign, and he got some traction with that among the left. He was ahead of his time on that for the left. I don't like that policy at any time, but for the left, he was a little ahead of his time on that one. Anyway, that's one example. In New York City, you had people like Mayor Koch, who stood up against President Carter on a number of occasions during their overlap. Ed Koch was mayor from 1978 until 1991. Early 92. Right, sorry, 1990. Sorry, 1978 until the January 1st, 1990. And so he had a few years where Jimmy Carter was the president, where he had a Democrat president, and he often feuded with him. Mario Cuomo was an outspoken Democrat, often bucking his party. And then if you go back really further into the 70s, you had people like Scoop Jackson. Henry Scoop Jackson was a senator, Frank Church. These were Democrats who thought independently and were part of that all politics is local understanding. But we don't have that now. You've got to be in step with what the party wants. And if the party feels that you're losing an election, like they felt with Eric Swalwell, they're going to cut you loose. They're not just going to cut you loose, though. They're going to smear you. And whatever you think of Eric Swalwell, you certainly don't hope he ends up like Justin Fairfax, because there were innocent people involved. The children of this couple, I mean, God help those children. This wife he killed. We don't want Eric Swalwell to spiral to that level because there's innocent people involved, folks. But this is what happens when you cut people loose in the MO that the Democratic Party has shown. When I heard about this with Justin Fairfax, I immediately emailed my coworkers and said there's a lot of parallels here between Justin Fairfax and Eric Swalwell. I hope you see them. And so I decided to enumerate them for you right now because it's important that we do that.